Oh, hi there. I'm Kat. Thank you for joining me for Chat with Kat. We're going on a journey and having conversations with people from a variety of backgrounds and experiences. And during this journey, we're going to probably laugh and smile. We'll have moments of compassion and cry. We may be angry or feel confronted, and we may be amazed and just need to ponder. So, whatever the emotion is that comes up, let's take a moment to breathe and ask ourselves why we're feeling this. And also, let's ask, what can I learn from this? So go ahead and like, share, subscribe to this, and make sure that your friends and family and colleagues and anyone you feel could get something from this gets to see this. So let's get on with our journey with Chat with Kat.
Well, hello, Sandro. Thank you so much for being here and doing this. We're in Self-Perfected together, and I, see you on occasion in the groups. But I don't know that I know too much about you, and so why don't you just share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I found Self-Perfected through TechnoTutor. Actually, I ended up getting TT first. And I found TT through gin, and I got into gin through real estate. So I was in the Navy for 7 years, got out of the Navy, came to South Texas, federal law enforcement. And in 2020, since I'm a federal employee, there was the mandate for all federal employees. And I didn't want to necessarily go along with that. So it really kind of opened my eyes to the precariousness of my situation. So I decided that I needed a secondary source of income so that I would at least have something to fall back on. And that's kind of what got me started into looking not just at like other sources of income, but like, hey, how did I end up in this position to begin with? So that was one of the things that started getting me to take a look at the system as a whole. And then through real estate, one of the guys in a mentorship course I was doing turned me on to Your Wish is Your Command. So I listened to that a bunch of times. And it's funny because at the end of that audio, it says, now go back and listen to this again. And so right at that point of the audio, I would just go back and listen to it again, not realizing there was a little bit more to it. And then after like 2 or 3 months, I had just let it play all the way to the end, and they talked about the Global Information Network. And so I was like, oh, there's actually a group. Let me see if there's anything in my area. The closest one was in Houston, so I went up to that, met Mayor there. And then through some mutual friends on Facebook, I saw a video of Luna recognizing her letters at like less than 2 years old. And I was like, what is this? So Mayor came and showed me TT, and we have 7 kids. So that was a no-brainer for me. And then from that, I just plugged into the group, and here we are.
Wow. So that's a bit of a journey to, I think most of us end up here because we're looking for some personal growth and development in some way, right? So it's a bit of a journey getting here. But you mentioned a little bit about like being in the Navy and a little bit about not wanting to do some of those things that they were, wanting to enforce. But what did life really look like for you personally before you started with the group and using the tools?
Life looked to me like constant trial. I was always trying to get to a certain place and never able to achieve it. And I decided when I was pretty young that I wanted to pursue a career in the Navy. And I specifically wanted to get into the Naval Special Warfare community. And I would get all these like mixed signals, like people would come up to me just randomly and just be like, hey, are you part of special warfare? And I'd be like, no. Or I was on this one training one of the instructors pulled me aside afterwards, and he was like, so what team are you with? And I was like, what do you mean? Did someone tell you I was applying? Because at that point I was applying. And he was like, no, you have the look. I know, I can tell, you know? And I was like, to me, I was just like, what? But then every time I would go to actually try out, either something that was outside of my control would happen, or I would end up failing one of the physical exams. And so I kept on getting all these mixed messages like, hey, I have this, you know, internal calling of like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and yet it's not happening. So what's going on? And that would happen over and over and over again. Eventually, I got the opportunity to work with the teams, and seeing it up close, I saw like, hey, this is a lot different than what I had pictured in my mind. You know, I became a little disillusioned. And so that allowed me to let go of that desire enough to consider some different options. So I started looking at like other organizations that had specialized teams. So I applied to a bunch of different ones, got picked up with the organization I'm with now. They have a pretty cool search and rescue team. And I tried out for that. And then the same exact pattern started playing out there, where it was like, I would go, everybody, like one of the guys in the mentorship program bet $100 to a buddy of his that I would make it through the training. And within like the first 24 hours, I got dropped for a medical issue. I had like a heat injury. So I was like, wow, how is this happening? You know, like this is what I'm meant to do. How do all these things keep on preventing me from achieving it? And I went back and made it further into the training, but then got dropped through something called peer evaluations, which is where, you know, the other people in the training evaluate each other. And I got ranked in the bottom. And again, I was just like, how, you know, like I was a team player. I was doing all this stuff. And I was racking my mind for like months, literally months, trying to figure out like, okay, I know it wasn't these guys. I know it wasn't these guys. Like, what did I do? Because if I go back, I got to make sure I don't make the same mistake. You know, you got to learn from your mistake. They won't tell you specifically what it was. So finally, I reached the point where I was like, okay, let me just like drop all of the presumptions that I've made about who would or wouldn't have done something. And as soon as I did that, the answer was like immediately apparent to me. I was like, oh, it was obviously these guys, because I said this to them and they must have taken it that way. And that really opened my eyes to like, okay, if I was so wrong about this particular thing because of a presumption that I had made that was preventing me from seeing what the reality was, what other presumptions might I be making that are preventing me from seeing reality as it is? Mm-hmm. And the reason I bring up that whole story is I think it's very relevant to the audio, Your Wishes, Your Command, to getting involved with TT and Self-Perfected, because if it hadn't been for that incident, I don't know if I would have been open-minded enough to consider those options as valid, you know? Like, I didn't get into self-improvement until after that, because I knew how to improve myself already. And it's one of those things where you don't know what you don't know. And so once I recognized that I didn't know what I didn't know, that allowed me to move to the next level and start the actual, you know, introspection that got me to where I'm at.
Wow, that's incredible. Because I think a lot of us have goals that we're really trying to meet and we never understand why we can't meet them, right? And there's always something that blocks us from getting there. So I think regardless whether it's in the Navy or in any other career or pursuit that we're doing, I think all of us face those challenges. But we're so in it, we can't step back and say, you know, what's really going on here.
Right. So it's one of those things where you much like your mind and your thoughts, your ego, you don't take the time to sit back and figure out where those things are coming from. You just automatically accept them all as true, as like, oh, I'm having this thought, therefore it must be me having this thought. You know, I want to do this thing. I have this desire to reach this goal. Therefore, that's me wanting that goal. I gotta do it. That's my calling, you know? But we've never stopped to question, why am I having these thoughts? Is that actually what's best? We just say, oh no, this is my calling. I gotta do it, you know? And it's such a cliche that like, follow your passion, you know, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Where, not that those sayings are inherently wrong, but they foster this mindset of, you know, never give up, that whole like manifest destiny, where whatever the feeling is that's coming up within you, whatever thoughts you're having, must be good, therefore you should pursue them.
So do you think that based on feelings, like a lot of people do what they do based on feelings, right? I'm passionate about this, so I'm going to do this. This is my life calling, whatever it is, right? Or even with family or friends, they do it based on feelings. Do you say that's necessarily the best way of going about things?
I think you really have to look at the starting point of like where those feelings are coming from. It's not to say that like following your feelings is always wrong, or that you should never follow your feelings or follow your passion or anything, but you have to question where why you're having those feelings. You know, because when I took a step back and looked at like, okay, why is it that I actually wanted to do these things? It was because I had this desire to be the best. And I had defined best as doing what's hardest. Because if it's a hard thing, then you're going to get, you're going to become the best. That mentality of like forged by fire, you know, you go through the trial and you come out stronger on the other end. But that's not necessarily true, because there's lots of people that work very hard and never achieve what they're working for. You know, look at the statistics of like small businesses, right? 90% of them fail in the first 5 years, and then 90% of those fail in the next 5 years. You can't say that those people aren't working hard. You know, so it's not necessarily that following your feelings is or is not best, but if you're not taking the time to look at where those feelings are coming from, then you don't know what is directing you. It's not you, because of those feelings or thoughts or emotions, whatever it is that's driving you. So unless you take the time to introspect and see where those things are coming from, then you're not really able to decide whether or not it's not best or is best. You're just kind of following, you know?
Yeah. That's interesting that you say that, because I was just having a conversation with a friend who's off to do stuff because it's now time for her, and she's going to do what makes her feel good. That's her whole goal. And I have no problem. Like, yes, you shouldn't feel horrible doing stuff that, you know, now in your life, right? Like, you shouldn't feel every day hating what you're doing and resenting the fact that you're there. But I just kind of go, but with what I know now and the training I've done, I'm thinking there's more than just what feels good for me, though.
Right. It's like, what about everybody else? It's interesting you bring that up. There's this idea I've been thinking about with specifically self-development, where people, and I think this is what separates Self-Perfected from a lot of the other self-development, self-improvement groups out there, is the word self. You look at self-development, but all of these courses and groups out there are all about just that feeling and that motivation and getting you into that group and just doing the thing in that moment. But you don't really look at who self is to improve. And that point of who self is, again, brings it back to what's the starting point. Because if you just say, oh, I'm going to improve to achieve XYZ goals, but you don't look at why you want those goals, what those goals are going to do, whether or not they're actually best for you, whether or not they're actually best for everybody around you, then are you really becoming the best version of yourself? Or are you just chasing whatever you've been impulsed with to pursue?
Right. Yeah. And that's interesting because you have to actually take a moment and think about that. You can't just react.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the goal of our group, right? Is we've been programmed to react specifically from childhood, all of the things around us, right? The entire world system as a whole, right? And when I say system, I mean everything. All of the influences around you, advertisement, school, TV, your parents, your community, government, like all of it is in one way or another driven by that point of self-interest of this is the way it is. We can't change it. We have to just accept things as they are. You're accepting that separation. You're accepting a lot of inequality. And because of that, it creates a being that automatically reacts the way you were saying from that self-interest. And the whole point of our group is to help you to reprogram your mind so that when you do automatically react, you're automatically reacting in a way that's best, not just for you, but everybody else.
So if we're talking about what's best for you and everybody else, you mentioned that you have 7 children. How does that relate to your family? Because I'm sure you've had this since having some kids, and then you've had this after having some kids, right? These tools and this
Right.
way of thinking now.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see the difference between all of them. My oldest son just turned 13, and so since we started using TT, I would say the thing that has changed most fundamentally as far as the family goes is my own approach to parenting. Because before we would spank, we would use reward and punishment. Having a big family, I had heard these different ideas of peaceful parenting, and I'd always kind of blown those off and never really considered it because spanking is like super effective. I don't know if you were spanked growing up.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, once you get spanked, it's like, okay, I'm not doing that anymore, right? And so especially having a big family, that was a very easy way to control my children. But one of the first videos I saw after joining Self Perfected was part of the parenting group, which there's so many resources within Self Perfected. It's awesome. And they have a parenting group. They have videos involved in that. And I was watching one of them, and they made this point of like, you want your child to be independent. You want your child to think for themselves and to not just go along with the crowd and do whatever it is that the authority is telling them to do. And yet you're using a parenting style and technique that is squashing the kids' creativity, telling them, don't question me. You do it because I said so. And understand, or they do something wrong, or they make a mistake, you punish them. And so you get kids that are averse to making mistakes, which is like how you learn. So then a kid isn't going to learn well because they're just going to be afraid of making a mistake. And you get kids that just follow the authority because if they don't, then they get punished. And that really hit me as like, oh, wow, I've been doing this wrong all along. And so making that change has been difficult, like, because now the kids know that, like, hey, I can challenge more, I can push back, I'm not necessarily going to get punished for doing X, Y, or Z, you know? And so it does, especially with a large family, make things more difficult, but with the end goal being having kids that can actually be themselves and not just be who you want them to be, it's worth it. And it's very interesting to see the difference between the kids that are younger, that are still in that stage where they're absorbing these lessons, and the kids who already have that foundation laid, to the point where, like, even when you encourage them, like, hey, I know we used to do it this way, but you're not necessarily going to get in trouble or whatever. It's like, it's still just that foundation's already been set. And it's not to say like, oh, it's never going to change now, but it is a consequence of the way we were raising our kids before. So.
Right. And do you feel like the older kids especially are taking to this at all, or are they kind of resistant to actually learning something new?
Well, my situation is kind of specific because there's not unity amongst my wife and I as to whether or not to use the tools. So it's just the younger 5 kids that are using TT right now. And yeah, there's a ton of resistance even from the younger kids because of that disunity. But that's just a consequence that I've created, and we've reached an agreement on how to move forward. So just kind of sticking with that regardless of the resistance, because I mean, any real change is going to come with resistance. I think we were joking about right before we got started recording about how, you know, sometimes you'll say you're ready for this change, and then life brings up a situation with all the points you're ready to change, and you're like, oh, why is this happening to me?
Yeah, but you declared it. I'm ready for the change of this. And it's like, okay, well, you said so. Yeah. Excuse me. So that's, I mean, that's interesting to hear you talking from the point of having children who are older and the consequence of actually doing what you now realize is not the correct way to parent. But it was when you started parenting. You thought this was the best tools I have to parent and you know, be a good parent. I don't think parents generally go out with the mindset going, I wonder how many bad things I can do to mess up my children, right? I don't think that's the intention of most people. Maybe there's a few, you know, demonic people out there who do that, but I think on the majority, people are doing the best that they can with the tools they have at the time, and because they don't know any better, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's why we talk about in the group a lot the importance of sharing these tools, because so many people are just so caught up in that struggle to survive the day to day that they don't have the time to look at why they're doing what they're doing and whether or not the actions they're taking are actually good or not. You know, like, look at, in our example specifically, we had a large family, and changing those parenting techniques would make life more difficult, and life was difficult enough as it is, you know, like just trying to get out the door with everybody's shoes on is difficult enough as it is, right? So to add that another stress on top of that, it's nobody's going to want to do that, especially when they're not thinking about whether or not that matters, because that's how you were parented. That's how, you know, all of society accepts that as okay. So we don't really question whether or not what we're doing is best. We just say like, hey, this is how it is.
Yeah. And it's really interesting coming from the perspective of when you grow up in something, you honestly don't know there's something else out there. And you think this is normal, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I can speak from experience where, you know, I knew I would say my mother was crazy. And I used to call, you know, like I'm sure every kid calls their parent crazy or an idiot or something at some point, right? I'm sure they do. But I would say for years, my mother was crazy. And then when I was a teenager, I actually realized that my friends' moms were not like my mom. And I went, huh, no, she really is crazy. Like, there was that realization of me saying a word and then actually having the realization of like, no, that actually is the truth. It's not just me saying a word because like I just don't like my mom in this instance. It's like, oh no, there actually is, because all my friends' moms aren't like this.
Yeah, it's important too, I think, to clarify that like we're not judging, you know, like, because I feel the same way about my parents, right? Like the way that I was parented, when I look back on it now, I was like, wow, you know, that's kind of messed up. But I don't hold it against them. I'm not judging them for it because, like you said, in a lot of cases, we just don't know any better. And also that, you know, participating in blame is useless. It's not going to change anything. There's this quote that I've heard said in the group a couple times, that like all judgment is self-judgment. And I realized what that meant when my two older boys were playing Frisbee, and the oldest one was having a harder time, you know, getting the hang of catching the Frisbee where he wanted it to go. And the younger one was kind of like picking it up a little quicker. And so the younger one was kind of like teasing him a little bit about it. And I could tell my oldest was getting frustrated. And the younger one said something to the effect of like, you're not very good at this. And then the older one was like, oh, well, you're not good at this or that, or, you know, he started to react. And I was like, hold up. The only reason that him saying that is upsetting you is because you're accepting it as true, or you're thinking that about yourself. Because he'd come up to you and said like, you're a cat, you know, or like you're a chair, you know. You'd be like, a chair? What are you talking about? Like, you're a chair. Yeah, you're a chair. Okay, I guess I'm not, but if that's all right, whatever, you know, like it wouldn't affect you at all.
Right.
But because he said you're not good at this, and you were thinking that about yourself, you reacted to it. And that really helped me to see that, like, oh wow, yeah, if there's a point that I'm reacting to, that's something that I need to look at within myself. And that's something that the group is awesome about helping out with, is just like, you get to look at, hey, why am I reacting to the things I'm reacting to? Dig into those, figure it out, and then decide, like, is this a good thing that I'm reacting this way? And then you have the chance to change it. And like, if that's not the point of life, then I don't know what is. Because if you're just going to be here and accept the way you are, or accept the way things are, and just because that's how they are, and not do anything about it, then you're never going to get anywhere. And society as a whole, like, is not going to change either, you know, because the same things that are happening within us are happening on a macro level within the communities around us. If you just look at like the inequality that within you and that other person playing Frisbee, that you're accepting, oh, I'm not as good, they're better, I'll just let them do the Frisbee, you know? And that same mentality is in society at large, where people are saying, yeah, I'm not as good as them, I'll let them run things. And then we get upset when things aren't being run in a way that's best for everybody, and they're just, you know, taking care of themselves, and you're like, hey, this is not fair, what about me? It's like, well, you didn't take the responsibility.
Right. Yeah, you gotta, I mean, I guess that's the thing, right? You have to step up if you want to make things change. Like, you gotta be the first person to make the change, I guess, right?
not necessarily the first, but yeah, you do have to make the change. And that's where these tools come into play, because if you look at education, right, like the whole educational system is so backwards. I know you talked with Mitch a little bit about this. That was a great interview. And you talked about the educational system and how it's just not set up for people to actually learn, and how learning and schooling, education and schooling, are not necessarily the same, right? So you go to school and you learn these things that you're told to learn, right? You see these versions of history and of how to do things, and then like 20 years later, it's all different, right? Math is different. You're doing the math differently. How is math different, right? How does that work? Science is different. You know, Pluto's no longer a planet, right? Like the atom is no longer, or the electron is no longer the smallest thing out there. It's like we don't really know anything, but because we identify ourselves as intelligent by how much we can regurgitate, then we get caught up on this idea of like, this is what it means to be educated. This is what it means to know things, is just to be able to like recall facts, not necessarily be able to apply them. And so when it comes to taking responsibility, because it took us so long to be able to learn even that small amount of information that has already changed and it's obsolete. So really we don't know anything in our own minds. Then how can we take responsibility for something when we don't understand it? You know, the perfect example would be doctors, right? Like doctors in medicine. The same thing happens in those fields where like doctors will do very outdated things just because that's how they were taught, you know, in medical school. And they're like, oh, that's newfangled, whatever. I'm not going to do that. Or like the science on that changes continuously. And since we didn't go to medical school, we think, oh, I don't know that. They know best. I have to defer to the experts, right? Even though, and a lot of times the experts don't even know what they're talking about. You know, my wife just had surgery done. They did it incorrectly. So then they had to go and redo it. And the post-care instructions from the first doctor to the second doctor were like completely different. You know, the first guy was like, you got to be on bed rest, basically. You can't be doing anything. You know, you can't lift anything more than like 5-10 pounds. And then the other doctor's like, yeah, you could just continue with life as normal. Yeah, you can do whatever. You know, don't be like, you know, entering weightlifting competitions or anything. But other than that, just do whatever. So to me, I was like, wow, you know, like to have two experts. And you can find the same thing online, right? There's experts out there that will justify any point of view. So unless you have the ability to be able to, like, first of all, read really quickly, that's super important because that's how we get the best retention of information. Actually understand what you're reading and then be able to apply it. If you're not able to do those things, then yeah, you're going to be unequal to the people that do have those areas of expertise. So because it took us so long to be able to learn even the little bit that we do, we're not able to take responsibility because we think to ourselves, oh, well, yeah, I can't possibly know that. I can't possibly figure that out. Or it would take too long, you know, and we don't have the time to be able to do that. And that gets into like, a lot of people are right. Even with the tools, you don't have the time. Because imagine if you had spent, you know, the 12 years of schooling that you had using these tools and actually learning things for yourself and being able to retain and apply it, where would you be now? You'd be a completely different person and you'd be able to take even more responsibility because the more you know, the more you can take responsibility for. But the way that the system is set up is to make sure that we don't have the time to do that because we're so busy just trying to get by.
Right. And also we're so busy, but we don't understand. That's the way our education is set up. No matter how great the school you go to, is that you're going to have a level of understanding that you don't get.
Yeah, absolutely. And that comes down to like the vocabulary that's within you. Because this idea of like your truth, I can see the validity behind that, because the vocabulary that people learn growing up, the words that they learn, the associations they make, the feelings that those will make it so that when you hear a specific phrase, you're interpreting that into your vocabulary and hearing what you're interpreting. You're not hearing what the other person is saying.
Mm.
And there was an instance recently. What was it? No, I don't want to share that example, but I will share this. Look at the phrase, treat others the way you would want to be treated. We hear this throughout our whole lives growing up, right? But nobody actually understands what that phrase means, because they've never been treated the way they would want to be treated.
Mm.
We've never treated ourselves the way that we would want to be treated. It's to be able to support yourself, to do what's best all the time, to not participate in thoughts that are not best, to help other people to do that for themselves. Like, that's what it would mean. And it wouldn't just like what we're told is like, oh, you see a homeless person and you give them $20, right? Like, because you would want $20 if you were in that position, right? But is that what you would really want? Or for me, the example that I saw was with the parenting. How would I want to be parented? I talked about that change of, shifting away from the reward and punishment and the spanking. I guess I didn't go into, so now instead of doing that, we explain those reasons. And sometimes it takes a lot longer to get through what would have been a very simple point, right? Like, hey, I would like you guys to pick up all these papers that are on the floor. Well, I don't want to do it. Okay, well, do you understand why I'm asking you to pick up all these papers off the floor, right? Because, all these little pieces of paper on the floor are going to accumulate, and then maybe we won't be able to see other things that are on the floor. Something sharp could be down there you could step on and hurt yourself. Paper is kind of slippery when it's on tile. If you guys like to run around a lot in the house, so if you step on it, you could slip and hurt yourself. There could be crumbs under there, and then ants could get in the house, or and you have to like go through all of these explanations to show them like, why do this? And even then they might not want to do it, right? Because they're kids. So you have to like continue to support them. And which is not to say like you just let your kids get away with whatever. Like, there are times where I'll have to be like, okay, well, I understand you don't want to do it, but it has to happen now. And here's why. I'll explain why it's important for it to happen now. And like, as parents, we don't always have the time to do that, right? Like, I have to go to work, we have places to be. So it's not like it's every single time I'm forcing them to do this, or I'm standing in this point of like, oh, they will do what's best 100% of the time, and I'll stick to it until they explain it. It's like, it's not always practical because of the consequences that we've created for ourselves. But the younger you start with that, the more you give your kids the ability to figure those things out for themselves, see the common sense behind what it is you're asking them to do, which will make them more likely to do it in the future. And so when I shifted that vocabulary within me, where I saw like, hey, this is how I would have wanted to have been parented, that's when the change actually happened. So, and that didn't happen until I got TT, because even hearing those words of like peaceful parenting, like I would hear those words, but I would have this automatic response to it of, no, not practical. that doesn't work for us. But just because something doesn't work in the situation as it is now doesn't mean that it wouldn't work if things were different. And I think that's the hardest part we have as a group, is when people come into Self-Perfected and they hear a term, specifically the term "what's best for all." Right? We've talked about that a lot. People listening to that will hear "best for all" and they'll think automatically these responses of dystopia, dictatorship, like not possible. Like what that used to be me when I would hear the phrase "what's best for all." That would be my response: not possible. Right? There's always going to be someone, but we prevent, because of how things are, because of the experiences and emotions and feelings that we have now, the definitions for those words within us, we allow that to hold us back and prevent us from seeing how things could be if those things were to change, if we changed those definitions within us, if we had children who were raised with these tools from the beginning, who were totally self-confident, who, could learn what a doctor could learn in 8 years within months, right? Then as we see happening within our group on a regular basis, these kids are just like learning at exponential rates. So when these kids grow up, they're not going to have those same restrictions that we do, because when they hear these words, they're not going to have those automated response of not possible or whatever the response that the system is programmed in. And so we'll be able to find new ways forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's really interesting is you're talking about, like, yeah, I probably had the same thoughts too. And even up until, I would say recently, like within a year or so, till I really started diving deep and doing a lot of the hard work, because I was doing the work, but I was doing what I call surface level work, right? I wasn't doing the deep work. But I still had a problem with the phrase "what's best for all," because I still was like, yeah, but look at all the people who are still doing bad. Like, we can do as much as we want, what's best for all, but look at the people who are intent on bad, right? And then actually, it's interesting. I had this, I was watching this YouTube video the other day about, what did he call it? Terraponics, I think is what he called it. I have to look it up. But he was talking about how in this very small plot of land in LA, that they decided to do gardening different to feed the community, right? It was an experiment. They're like, I wonder how many people we could feed from this small little lot of land in LA with food. And that what they ended up doing was putting everything in pots, but what was different is that these pots were irrigated on a timer collected from rainwater, but they recycled the water. So what they did is, like, once the plants had absorbed what they needed, it drained to the bottom, went back into the system, and recycled back into the system again on a timer system. And they said that with the water that they collect in LA from rainwater, that this system could easily go 60 years or more just by doing that without having to add new water to the system. And they're feeding 34 families now. Families, not people, families now in that neighborhood with food. Yeah. And he said it's, it's hard work to set it up. But he said the biggest problem is not the money and the time it takes for people to set it up. He's like, nobody thinks about what they're going to do with the excess food when they're done. They're just thinking about, I'll do this for my family. And I just thought, oh, isn't that interesting? If we're thinking about making this big difference in the world, we could just start with our neighborhood, right? Oh, yeah, exactly. Let me see how many people I can feed with this food I grow that's in excess for my family.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And that's like, so we have a homestead here. We have 10 acres, and that is a lot of work. Like, I have people at work all the time asking me, like, hey, what do you do to stay in shape? And like, you work, I got to get on your diet and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, there's no diet, just get 10 acres and then try to keep up. It's like that much work. And we've got animals, we've got livestock, and we're trying to take responsibility for our food. A lot of times it doesn't work out, but a lot of times when it does, there's so much abundance. It's like more than you can handle. And even for our family, we dried off our milk cow recently, but we had a milk cow, and that cow was producing 2 gallons a day. So even our family could not keep up with drinking that much milk. So we were like having to make cheese, and then we were giving it to other people within our homeschooling community. And that really made me like take a step back and think like, hey, this would be a very like easy way to start a sustainable community of sharing food, sharing resources, where like I know that I personally could not produce all of the food necessary for our family. But maybe our family takes responsibility for the milk, and another family takes responsibility for vegetables, and another family takes responsibility for beef or something, you know? And between the 3 or 4 families, you make a community, and you guys all share, and you're taking responsibility for your food that way. You're learning. And then there's also that like point of not having to go into the inequality of, oh, well, I have to accept things the way they are because I cannot provide for myself. Which is where we've ended up at with this fight for convenience, where when we want everything immediately or fast or just on the shelf to where we can go get it, then that convenience comes at the cost of, okay, well, now they have to add the preservatives to this food. Now they have to pasteurize. Now they have to do all these other things for that convenience. And it's not to say that like the system as a whole like is conspiring to poison us or whatever. It's just like, we have not created a system that is taking all of those things into account. And we do have the opportunity to do that if we have the knowledge to take the responsibility for it, like we would for our milk or for beef or whatever. The same way you were pointing out how like you could feed 34 families with just that one little plot of land. I mean, imagine how if people were to like, that's a great point of like right there is an example of treating others the way you would want to be treated. As instead of giving somebody money or food stamps to where they can go to the store and buy Doritos or hot Cheetos or whatever else that, you know, they've been impulsed to want, that's not really healthy for them. You could give them the tools, the knowledge to be able to have a plot of land like that and get the fruits, the gifts that the earth is giving you out of its own abundance. And like, wouldn't you rather have that? Wouldn't you rather have the knowledge to take responsibility and do something for yourself than to just get by on whatever handouts that you're being given?
Yeah. And I mean, you can do it trial and error on your own, but it's so much better when you have people working together and somebody who has knowledge and can share it with you. And I mean, that's like anything in life, right? You can try to learn how to drive a car on your own, or it's better to go, learn from how to drive a car from someone who knows how to drive a car and has been doing it for years, right?
Yeah. It's this homesteading has taught us a lot, and it's been a very challenging journey for us because we don't have anybody like that in our community that to share that knowledge with us. So it's a lot of trial and error, a lot of mistakes, and it's been a learning process. But now imagine if we just like to keep all that knowledge to ourselves just to try and provide for our family. Number one, I can't do it. I don't have the time. I don't have the energy. It's too much work, right? And number two, like, even if I could, there would be so much extra, it would end up just going to waste,
Are you actually being able to teach the kids the other tools, or is it just really what you're being able to gather from your own process?
I mean, I've definitely seen results with the kids from using the tools. It's really cool to see the change in them, in their ability to not just express themselves, but also like be themselves. I've shared this story before, but there was this time I was walking back with my son from the chicken coop, and I actually caught it on video. Because I was recording something for the homestead, where we're walking back and he's like, you know, Dad, I really like you. He was 4 at the time. And I was like, yeah, why is that? And he was like, well, before you used to yell at us all of the days, and now you hardly yell at us any of the days.
Aww.
And like that hit me so hard, I almost cried. And I was like, you know, I really like you too, and I'm glad that I don't do that anymore. Because and it's not just that like, oh, I feel good because my son likes me, and that's why I should do these things. It was seeing for the first time the consequence of how I was parenting before, and how, having made that change, now he has a different understanding of what parenting is supposed to be like. And so he will be less likely to have to walk through that consequence when he gets older. Kind of like we were talking about, like how we see things as they are now, preventing us from seeing things as they could be. Now my son has the option of taking a different path because I'm not imposing on him the consequences that I experienced. So I don't have to continue to pass that on to the next generation. So that's one really cool thing that I've noticed. And then also, I mean, academically as well, they pick up on things so quickly. Like I could give you countless examples. I told my 1-year-old daughter, hey, it's time to go do TT. There was a parenting situation I had to deal with, so I stop, I go deal with that. I come back to go do her TT with her, and she's at the computer. I walk up to the computer, and the words TT are typed into the computer. You type T twice. She's 1. You know, I'm like blown away. You know, my son, when he was 4, we're walking back from the chicken coop, and he's doing subtraction. You know, he's like, hey, you know, if I drop this egg, right now we have 4 eggs, and if I drop this one, then we'll only have 3 eggs. And if we drop 2, then we'll only have 2 eggs, you know, at 4 years old. Like, and I get that there's probably other kids out there that, you know, have the ability to do these things. But what other kids are doing that just from doing a program for, you know, 5-10 minutes a day? Right? Like, and we're not sitting down doing workbooks or copying letters all day long. It's just using the tools. And you see this time and time again throughout the community. There's so many videos out there of all the kids just like orders of magnitude ahead of where other kids are at. And then like just the depth of understanding they have too. It's crazy. You can have such mature conversations with such young children.
Yeah. And I remember being at San Diego a couple of years ago with some of the kids there around the campfire. And it was just incredible. They decided they're making these bracelets, they're selling them, they had a bunch of fun, and now they're going to make some money. And gosh darn it, it was hard to say no to these kids because were like, it wasn't just like no and walk away. It's like, but why would you not want this bracelet that I made? Like, it's so beautiful, and I made it by myself, and it's not something you buy in a store. And it's, I mean, just the reasoning behind like, well, why wouldn't you want this thing, right? And actually having to have that conversation with them, it's like, well, I didn't actually bring any cash with me. Well, you could go to the ATM and take some cash out.
Yeah,
like, you know,
it's so cool how you know, you put yourself in that situation and you think to yourself like, oh, I'm being pushy, oh, they're going to think I'm just trying to get their money or this or that. Like, you have all these internal conversations happening in your head that would have prevented you from doing that. But because these kids are being raised differently, where they don't have to experience those consequences, they get to actually express themselves. And then if they do get rejected and turned down, it's not going to be the end of the world for them. They'll just be like, okay, yeah, you don't want it. That's fine. I'll find someone else who does.
And that's the thing. They would walk off to somebody else when they realize like that person's just not going to give in or whatever. But finally, they would be okay with whatever reason the person gave if they didn't want to buy it, their bracelet for like $3 or $5 or whatever it was, right? And they'd move on to somebody else. And it was like, nothing. It's okay, whatever. Like there was no upset there. And some of them were little too. Like I think some of them were about 3 years old, right? Who were trying to sell these. And then I think some were about 5 or 6. So there were some older kids there too. But it was just like not affected by the answer no, not affected by the fact that you didn't want something that they made, right? They're just, all right.
Yeah. I mean, think about when these kids grow up, how much more effective they're going to be at communicating their wants and desires to others, and not just what they want, but why they want it. And selling other people on that too. It's so tough for us to a lot of times even share the group or the tools, because we have all this, internal programming of, oh, sales is bad, or salesmen are pushy, this, that, and the other. And we allow these things to prevent us from sharing, And these kids are not going to have those issues when they grow up. So
no, not at all. And it's pretty incredible to think like the environment these kids have, and they don't know anything different for a lot of them. And it's just incredible to see like how they are as actual human beings. They're not just, and it's not just them. Yes, they're kids. They're still going to run around and play and do the things kids do, but just the way they can interact and problem solve and at such a young age. It's just incredible.
It really is. I mean, I had a conversation with my 4-year-old daughter yesterday or the day before about how, like, she kept on having this reaction of like screaming, and like she wouldn't get what she wanted, and so she would scream, and she'd be like, "Nah, I want it. I want this or that." And I would talk to her, and over and over, I'd explain like, "Hey, that's not the best way to get what you want. Like, we have to explain, we have to talk to people, we have to try to convince them." And it was so cool that yesterday evening, I saw her talking to my wife and actually applying those points of like, instead of going into the reaction of just screaming and demanding that she get what she wanted, she actually started talking to her like, "Hey, well, what if I could just listen to like one song right now, and then you could turn it off after that, instead of not letting me listen to any songs, And I pointed out to her that how great it was that she was able to communicate in that way, and that even if she still didn't get what she wanted, how much better that was, not just for her, but everybody around her, right? Because if she's screaming, she's hurting people's ears, right? She's probably hurting her own ears. Within her body, there's a reaction to that screaming. There's the fight or flight. There's the chemicals that are coming up. There's the anger, the emotions, the disease that comes from the emotional responses to things, the physical imbalance. You're actually harming your body, So to be able to explain all those things to a kid, and them growing up with that mentality and understanding of why they should act in certain ways, I mean, that's what's going to change the world,
Yeah. And I think that's important to realize, like, starting with ourselves and starting with our communities, our families is what's actually making the change. It's not going the big, hey, I got to change everything right now in the world, because that's a little bit daunting, but to say the least, right? If you think I got to change all of the world leaders right now.
Even changing yourself, it's very daunting, but are you going to let that stop you?
Right. But until you can make the change yourself and start doing it within your own area, like really, how can you start changing world leaders, right? So, or whatever else is going on. But so I wanted to ask you, and I do ask everybody this, like if you go back to your 10-year-old self, do you have any advice you'd want to give to yourself? And it could be 5 years old, but I mean, I say 10 because at 10, you've pretty much got a lot more understanding than most 5-year-olds.
Right. It's such a tough question. Because when I think about it, I think about who I was at 10 years old, right? I probably already started making that decision of like, hey, I got to do the hard things because that's what would be best, or that's what would make me the best, which is kind of what started me on the trajectory that guided all of my life decisions. And since that foundation was already set, I honestly don't know if there is anything that I could say to myself. But then again, that's the same mentality we've been talking about already, of like accepting the way things are and then not trying to change it because we don't trust ourselves enough to do that. So I guess I'd have to trust myself enough to know how to sell myself on seeing things a different way. And that would probably look a lot like, hey, you know, I know that you think that you're going to be the best by chasing these achievements, these things outside of yourself. But the only way that you'll become the best version of yourself is by looking inside at why it is that you want to do these things and figure out, is that actually what's best or not, and make your decisions based on that. And I'd sell myself on, you know, within a few years, you're going to, this group is going to come up. You need to go find that group, become a part of it, because they're going to help you to be the best version of yourself as well.
Nice. As we're just sitting with that, as I'm just thinking, like, what advice or what other insights do you want to share right now with people?
If you're part of the group, I would just say, if there's points that you are reacting to, or if there's things that that are continuously coming up in your life, like those are opportunities for you to dig deeper and figure out, like, okay, why is this happening? So you can kind of dig deeper into the process and figure out what points you have to face. And then if you're not part of the group, I would say reach out. You know, you have nothing to lose. I know there's like a lot of negative stuff out there online about the group and the tools, but like, are you just going to continue trusting what is said online or what other people say? Or are you going to trust yourself enough to make up your own mind? You know, come check it out, like hop on the calls, ask for a presentation, you know, see it for yourself and make your own decision.
Mm-hmm.
Because you stand to, like, you've got nothing to lose by being a part of the group. Maybe, you know, an hour of your time, you decide you don't like it. And what you stand to gain is the ability to reprogram yourself to actually be who you want to be, and not just be whatever your parents and the media and the other aspects of the system have programmed you to be.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's great. And you're right. I think people just have to actually try something and figure out if it's good for them or not, if this is true. Like, is there a truth to this? Is this good for me? Does it, you know, or not? Because people can talk about anything, how good something is, right? They could talk about how great a diet is for you, But until you try it for yourself and say, does this really work for me? You don't know.
Exactly.
So, well, thank you so much, Sandro. I know you've got a busy day with your family, but I really appreciate you being here and sharing. And yeah, and thank you for doing this again, because I know we had some technical issues before. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, not everybody gets a second chance to make a first impression. So,
Well, there you go. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Bye.
thank you. Bye.